A boy became paraplegic after a traumatic accident. His stepmother, tired of caring for him, abandoned him in a forest. Vulnerable and alone, the boy didn't know what would happen that night. A wolf appears and deeply moves him. Before hearing this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, as the Anderson family car wound its way along the winding road that cut through the mountains. In the back seat, Ethan, a 10-year-old boy, gazed at the landscape with dreamy eyes, while his mother, Sarah, softly hummed a lullaby. Beside him, his younger brother, Caleb, slept soundly, lulled by the purr of the engine and his mother's melodious voice. In the driver's seat, Michael, Ethan's father, drove with concentration, his hands firmly gripping the steering wheel. The silence inside the vehicle was comfortable, broken only by the low music coming from the radio and Sarah's occasional comment about the beauty of the landscape. "Look, Ethan!" exclaimed Sarah, pointing to a group of trees by the roadside. "Can you see that wolf? Isn't it beautiful?" Ethan leaned forward, his eyes wide with excitement. There it was, a majestic, solitary grey wolf watching the car pass by with curious eyes. For a brief moment, the animal's gaze met Ethan's, and the boy felt an inexplicable connection, as if that encounter was more than mere coincidence. "Mom, can I take a picture?" Ethan asked, already reaching for his phone in his pocket. "Of course, sweetie, but be quick." "We're almost at your grandparents' ranch," Sarah replied with an affectionate smile. As Ethan struggled to capture the moment with his camera, Michael cast a worried glance through the rearview mirror. "Be careful, son. Don't get too close to the window." Michael's warning had barely been uttered when a loud crash echoed down the road. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. A truck suddenly appeared on a sharp bend, invading the opposite lane. Michael tried to swerve, but the space was too narrow. The impact was brutal. The car spun violently, flipping several times before finally coming to a stop, upside down on the edge of a precipice. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of twisted metal and broken glass. Ethan, still held by his seatbelt, hung upside down, dazed and confused. The pain in his body was intense, but the fear for what had happened to his family was even greater. "Mom, Dad, Caleb," he called, his voice trembling. There was no response. With difficulty, Ethan managed to unbuckle his seatbelt, falling onto the crushed roof of the car. He dragged himself out of the vehicle, ignoring the searing pain in his legs. The cold night air hit him like a slap, bringing him back to the cruel reality of the moment. "Help!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the silent forest. "Someone, please help!" But there was no one around. The road was deserted. The truck that had hit them had disappeared, leaving behind only destruction and silence. Ethan tried to stand up, but his legs wouldn't respond. Panic began to take over as he realized he couldn't feel them. Tears streamed down his face as he struggled to understand what was happening. It was then that he heard a distant howl. Turning towards the sound, Ethan saw a familiar figure emerging from the shadows, the grey wolf he had spotted moments before the accident. The animal approached cautiously, its golden eyes fixed on Ethan. There was something in its gaze, a mixture of curiosity and compassion, that calmed the boy amidst the chaos. "Please," Ethan whispered, extending a trembling hand towards the wolf. "I need help." To his surprise, the wolf didn't retreat. On the contrary, it came even closer, allowing Ethan to touch its soft fur. At that moment, a strange sense of calm enveloped the boy, as if the animal was conveying a silent message of comfort. The sound of sirens in the distance broke the enchantment of the moment. The wolf pricked up its ears, alert, before casting one last look at Ethan and disappearing into the darkness of the forest. Minutes later, paramedics and firefighters arrived at the accident scene. Ethan was carefully extracted from the wreckage and placed on a stretcher. As he was being taken to the ambulance, he couldn't help but think about the wolf and the strange connection they had shared. The hours that followed passed like a blur for Ethan. The coming and going of doctors, the endless exams, the questions from the police, everything seemed distant and unreal. It was only when his grandfather, Jack, entered the hospital room, his face marked by concern and sadness, that reality began to set in. "Ethan, my grandson," Jack said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm so glad you're okay." Ethan looked at his grandfather, his eyes full of unshed tears. "Grandpa, where's Mom? And Dad? And Caleb?" The silence that followed was more eloquent than any words. Jack sat on the edge of the bed, taking Ethan's hand in his. "Ethan, my dear, something very sad happened." The words that followed changed Ethan's life forever. His mother and brother had not survived the accident. His father was in a coma, with an uncertain future. And Ethan, the boy who once ran and played with such joy, was now paralyzed from the waist down. Ethan's world crumbled at that instant. The tears he had been holding back for so long finally overflowed, and he cried in his grandfather's arms, letting out all the pain, fear, and confusion that consumed him. As night fell over the hospital, Ethan fell asleep, exhausted by the whirlwind of emotions. In his dreams, he saw himself again in the forest, running freely alongside the grey wolf. It was a dream of freedom, of possibilities, a glimpse of hope amid the darkness that now enveloped his life. But dawn would bring new challenges. Ethan didn't know it, but his journey was just beginning. A journey of overcoming, of discoveries, and of unexpected love that would transform not only his life but that of everyone around him. The days following the accident passed like a blur for Ethan. The hospital room, with its white walls and persistent smell of antiseptic, became his new world. The visits from doctors, the endless exams, and the physiotherapy sessions formed a monotonous routine that barely distracted him from his new and painful reality. The absence of his mother and brother was an open wound that refused to heal. Every time he closed his eyes, Ethan could see Sarah's warm smile and hear Caleb's contagious laughter. The longing was a constant presence, an invisible weight that oppressed him day and night. His father, Michael, remained in a coma on another floor of the hospital. The doctors spoke in low tones about brain damage and uncertain recovery, words that Ethan overheard, feeling fear grow in his chest. It was in this scenario of uncertainty and pain that a new figure entered Ethan's life. Jessica, his father's new wife. She had married Michael just a few months before the accident, in a discreet ceremony that had left a bitter taste in Ethan's mouth. Jessica was a woman of cold and calculating beauty. Her green eyes, normally full of false sweetness, now looked at Ethan with a mixture of pity and poorly disguised inconvenience. She began to visit the hospital frequently, always impeccably dressed and made up, as if she were more concerned with appearances than with her stepson's well-being. "Ethan, darling," she would say, her honeyed voice hiding a coldness that the boy could feel. "How are you feeling today?" Ethan usually responded with monosyllables, uncomfortable with his stepmother's presence. There was something about her that deeply bothered him, a sense of falseness that he couldn't ignore. Ethan's grandparents, Jack and Eleanor, were constant and comforting presences. They took turns staying with their grandson, bringing a bit of warmth and love to the sterile hospital environment. Eleanor always arrived with a container of homemade food, determined to make Ethan eat something besides the insipid hospital meals. "You need to eat well to get strong, my angel," she would say, gently stroking her grandson's hair. Jack, in turn, brought books and games, trying to distract Ethan from his dark thoughts. He told stories of his youth on the ranch, talked about animals and nature, trying to awaken in his grandson an interest in the world beyond the hospital walls. It was during one of these visits that Ethan finally found the courage to ask the question that had been tormenting him for weeks. "Grandpa," he said, his voice low and hesitant, Will I be able to walk again?" The silence that followed was heavy. Jack exchanged a look with Eleanor, who had tears in her eyes. Finally, the grandfather sat on the edge of the bed, holding Ethan's hand between his own. "Ethan, my dear," he began, carefully choosing his words, "the doctors are doing everything they can, but the truth is we don't know. It might be yes, it might be no. The important thing is that no matter what happens, we'll be here with you. Always." Jack's words, though gentle, fell upon Ethan like a crushing weight. The reality of his situation, which he had been trying to avoid, finally hit him with full force. The tears he had been holding back for so long overflowed, and he cried in his grandparents' arms, letting out all the pain, fear, and frustration that consumed him. That night, alone in his hospital room, Ethan dreamed again of the grey wolf. In the dream, he could walk, run, and leap freely through the forest, the wolf by his side like a silent companion. When he woke up, his face still wet with tears, Ethan felt a small spark of hope ignite in his chest. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward, no matter how difficult it seemed now. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Ethan continued his daily battle against paralysis, undergoing endless physiotherapy sessions. Every small progress was celebrated, a movement of his toes, a tingling sensation in his legs. But the road was long and arduous, and often Ethan felt discouraged and exhausted. It was during this period that Jessica began to show her true nature. With Michael still in a coma and showing no signs of improvement, she began to visit Ethan less frequently, always with elaborate excuses about unavoidable commitments. When she did come, her visits were short and superficial, as if fulfilling an unpleasant obligation. One day, Ethan accidentally overheard a conversation between Jessica and her lawyer in the hospital corridor. The words he caught left him cold. Custody of the boy, Sir Michael's inheritance, and boarding school. Fear took hold of Ethan. He knew that Jessica had never seen him as part of her family, but the idea of being sent away, separated from his grandparents and everything he knew, was terrifying. Desperate, Ethan confided his fears to his grandparents. Jack and Eleanor listened attentively, their aged faces marked by concern and indignation. "Don't worry, my love," Eleanor said, hugging her grandson tightly. "We won't let that happen. You're ours, and we'll fight for you." Jack nodded solemnly. "I'll talk to our lawyer first thing tomorrow. Jessica won't be able to take you away from us, Ethan. I promise." His grandparents' words brought some comfort, but the fear persisted. That night, unable to sleep, Ethan looked out the hospital window at the starry sky. Out there, somewhere in the vastness of the night, he imagined his grey wolf running free through the forest. How he wished he had that freedom, that strength. "Please," he whispered into the night, "help me be strong. Help me overcome this." As if in response, a distant howl echoed in the night, so low that Ethan almost believed it was his imagination. But that sound, real or not, brought with it a wave of determination. Ethan decided that no matter what happened, he wouldn't give up. He would fight for his recovery, for his future, for his family. What Ethan didn't know was that his fate was about to take an unexpected turn. Jessica's actions, his grandparents' decisions, and the mysterious presence of the grey wolf were about to converge, leading him on a journey that would test his limits and change his life forever. Autumn arrived, painting the trees in shades of red and gold. For Ethan, however, the changes of the season were just a cruel reminder of the time passing, trapped within the hospital walls. 3 months had passed since the accident, and although his body was slowly recovering, his mind continued to be tormented by nightmares and painful memories. Jessica's visits became increasingly rare and tense. She always arrived in a hurry, casting furtive glances at Ethan, as if he were an inconvenience she didn't know how to handle. During one of these visits, she finally revealed her intentions. "Ethan, darling," she began, her voice falsely sweet, "I've been thinking a lot about your future. You know that your father, well, the doctors aren't very optimistic, and I'm not in a position to take care of you alone." Ethan felt a knot form in his throat. He knew what was coming next. "There's a special school," Jessica continued, avoiding her stepson's gaze. "A wonderful place for children with special needs. They have the best doctors, the best therapists. I think it would be best for you." Jessica's words fell like stones in Ethan's stomach. A special school, far from everything and everyone he knew. The idea terrified him. "I don't want to go," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly. "I want to stay with my grandparents." Jessica's face hardened for an instant before returning to her mask of false concern. "Oh dear, I know you love them, but they're elderly. They can't take care of someone in your condition. You need specialized care." Before Ethan could protest again, the door to the room opened. Jack and Eleanor entered, their faces serious as they sensed the tension in the air. "What's going on here?" Jack asked, his voice grave. Jessica stood up, nervously adjusting her blouse. "We were just discussing options for Ethan's future. As his stepmother, it's my duty to ensure he receives the best possible care." Eleanor approached Ethan's bed, placing a protective hand on her grandson's shoulder. "And as his grandparents, it's our duty to ensure he stays with his family," she said firmly. The tension in the room was palpable. Ethan looked from one adult to another, feeling small and powerless in the face of the decisions being made about his life. It was at this moment that Dr. Thompson, the doctor in charge of Ethan's case, entered the room. He seemed surprised to see everyone there, but quickly regained his professional composure. "Good afternoon, everyone," he said, looking around. "Excuse me for interrupting, but I have important news about Ethan." All eyes turned to the doctor, the previous discussion momentarily forgotten. "Ethan has made remarkable progress in the last few weeks," Dr. Thompson began, a gentle smile on his face. "The tests show a significant improvement in the sensitivity of his legs. With intensive therapy and a lot of effort, I believe there's a real chance he might walk again." The news fell like a bomb in the room. Ethan felt his heart race, a mixture of hope and fear taking hold of him. Walking again? It seemed like a distant dream that suddenly became possible. Jack and Eleanor exchanged emotional glances, tears in their eyes. Jessica, on the other hand, seemed uncomfortable, as if the news had disrupted her plans. "That's wonderful," she said, but her voice lacked genuine enthusiasm. "But still, a specialized school could offer the best treatment, couldn't it, Doctor?" Dr. Thompson frowned slightly. "Actually," he said, "what Ethan needs most now is emotional support and a stable family environment. Recovery will be a long and challenging process. Having people who love him by his side will make all the difference." The doctor's words seemed to seal Ethan's fate. Jack stepped forward, his voice firm and decisive. "Doctor, my wife and I want to take Ethan to our ranch. We have space, resources, and most importantly, all the love in the world to give him. We can hire the best physiotherapists and ensure he has all the necessary support." Dr. Thompson nodded, approving the idea. "I think that would be excellent for Ethan's recovery. The contact with nature, fresh air, tranquility, all of this can accelerate his healing process." Jessica seemed about to protest, but something in Jack's determined look made her back down. She muttered something about having to leave and hurriedly left the room, leaving behind a charged silence. Ethan looked at his grandparents, feeling a wave of relief and gratitude. "Can I really go to the ranch?" he asked, his voice full of hope. Eleanor leaned down to hug him, tears of happiness in her eyes. "Of course you can, my love. We'll take care of you. We'll help you get strong again." That night, as Ethan prepared for bed, he felt a change in the air. The fear and uncertainty that had dominated him for so long began to give way to a new sensation: hope. The idea of leaving the hospital, breathing the fresh air of the ranch, being surrounded by the love of his grandparents, all of this seemed like a dream coming true. Looking out the window, Ethan saw the full moon shining in the night sky. For a moment, he thought he saw a shadow moving among the distant trees, the silhouette of a wolf, perhaps. But before he could be sure, the vision disappeared. With a smile on his lips, Ethan fell asleep, his dreams populated by images of green fields, galloping horses, and a grey wolf running by his side. The future, which had seemed so bleak before, now shone with possibilities. The day of Ethan's departure from the hospital arrived with a mix of emotions. There was anxiety, expectation, and a touch of fear of the unknown. As the nurses helped him settle into the wheelchair, Ethan took one last look at the room that had been his home for the past few months. The white walls, once so oppressive, now seemed almost welcoming in their familiarity. "Are you ready, champ?" asked Jack, placing a comforting hand on his grandson's shoulder. Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. "I am, Grandpa." The journey to the ranch was a journey of rediscovery. Ethan watched out the window of the adapted van, marveling at the vibrant autumn colors painting the landscape. Trees with golden and red leaves passed in a blur, and the blue sky seemed more alive than he remembered. After a few hours of travel, the van finally turned onto a dirt road. Ethan's heart raced when he saw the gates of his grandparents' ranch. It was a place he knew well from previous visits, but now it took on a new meaning. The main house of the ranch was an old and welcoming building with a wide porch and large windows. Ethan noticed that a ramp had been installed at the entrance, a change made especially for him. When the van stopped, Eleanor appeared at the door, her face lit up with a warm smile. "Welcome to your new home, my love," she said, tears shining in her eyes. With the help of Jack and the driver, Ethan was transferred to his wheelchair. He took a deep breath, feeling the fresh ranch air fill his lungs. The smell of freshly cut grass and wildflowers enveloped him, bringing back memories of summers past. As they entered the house, Ethan was surprised by the changes. The furniture had been rearranged to facilitate the passage of his wheelchair, and his old room on the ground floor had been completely remodeled. "We made some adaptations," Jack explained, guiding Ethan down the hallway. "We want you to feel as comfortable as possible." Ethan's room was spacious and cozy. An electric hospital bed occupied one corner, but it was covered with a colorful quilt made by Eleanor, giving a homey touch to the medical equipment. The walls were decorated with family photos and posters of his favorite movies and bands. "What do you think, dear?" asked Eleanor anxiously. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. "It's perfect, Grandma." "Thank you." The days that followed were ones of adaptation. Ethan had to get used to a new routine, which included daily physiotherapy sessions with a professional who came to the ranch. The work was arduous and often painful, but Ethan pushed himself to the maximum, driven by the desire to regain his mobility. A week after his arrival, Ethan was sitting on the porch watching the sunset when he heard a familiar sound. A distant howl echoed across the property, making his heart leap. "Grandpa!" he called, excited. "Did you hear that?" Jack, who was watering some plants nearby, approached. "What, son?" "The howl, it sounded like a wolf." Jack furrowed his brow, thoughtful. "Well, we do have some wolves in the area, but they usually don't come this close to the ranch. Must have been a wild dog." But Ethan was sure of what he had heard. That howl awakened in him a vivid memory of the wolf he had seen on the day of the accident. Could it be possible that it was the same animal? In the days that followed, Ethan began to ask to spend more time outdoors. He loved feeling the sun on his face and observing the ranch animals. Jack would take him for walks through the fields, telling stories about rural life and teaching Ethan about the different plants and animals. It was during one of these walks that something extraordinary happened. They were near the edge of the forest when Ethan spotted a movement among the trees. His heart almost stopped when he saw a gray wolf emerge from the vegetation. "Grandpa, look," he whispered, pointing. Jack, who was pushing the wheelchair, stopped abruptly. "My God," he muttered, clearly surprised. The wolf watched them from a safe distance, its golden eyes fixed on Ethan. There was something familiar in that gaze, an intelligence that went beyond animal instinct. "It's him, Grandpa," Ethan said, his voice trembling with emotion. "It's the wolf I saw on the day of the accident." Jack seemed skeptical, but didn't argue. The wolf remained motionless for a few moments, as if assessing the situation. Then, slowly, it turned and disappeared into the forest. "We'd better head back to the house," Jack said, still looking at the spot where the wolf had vanished. That night, lying in his bed, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the wolf. There was something about that encounter that made him feel it wasn't a coincidence. It was as if the animal was there for a reason, as if it had a message for him. Ethan fell asleep with these reflections, his dreams populated by mysterious forests and protective wolves. He didn't know it, but that encounter was just the beginning of a series of events that would change his life forever. The next morning, Ethan woke up with renewed determination. He faced his physiotherapy session with a vigor that surprised even his therapist. Something had changed within him, a spark of hope that now burned stronger than ever. As he struggled to move his legs, Ethan thought of the wolf, its strength and grace. If it can survive in the wild, he thought, I can overcome this. What Ethan didn't know was that, hidden at the edge of the forest, a pair of golden eyes watched him, silent and vigilant. The grey wolf was there like an invisible guardian, waiting for the right moment to fully reveal itself. Weeks turned into months, and winter came to the ranch, covering the fields with a white blanket of snow. For Ethan, each day brought new challenges and small victories. His physiotherapy sessions continued to be intense, but now he faced them with fierce determination, driven by the memory of the grey wolf. One particularly cold morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. Looking out his bedroom window, he saw the world outside covered in white, snowflakes falling softly. It was then that he noticed something unusual, footprints in the snow, too big to be from a dog, leading from the edge of the forest to near his window. With his heart racing, Ethan called for his grandparents. Jack entered the room, still sleepy. "What is it, son?" he asked, concerned. "Grandpa, look," Ethan pointed to the window. "There are footprints out there. I think it's from the wolf." Jack approached, frowning as he saw the marks in the snow. "Interesting," he muttered. "I've never seen a wolf come this close to the house before." That day during his physiotherapy session, Ethan seemed more motivated than ever. He struggled to move his legs, visualizing the wolf running freely through the forest. "You're making incredible progress, Ethan," commented Dr. Ryan, his physiotherapist, watching the boy's movements with admiration. "There's something different about you today." Ethan smiled, thinking of the footprints he had seen that morning. "I just feel stronger," he replied. As the days passed, Ethan began to notice more signs of the wolf's presence. Sometimes it was a distant howl in the middle of the night. Other times, fresh footprints in the snow around the house. He began to feel as if the animal was watching over him, protecting him somehow. One afternoon, as Jack was taking Ethan for a ride around the property's boundaries, they spotted the wolf again. This time the animal was closer, standing at the edge of a small grove, its golden eyes fixed on Ethan as if recognizing him. "Grandpa, can we get closer?" Ethan asked, his voice barely containing his excitement. Jack hesitated. "I don't know if it's safe, Ethan. Wolves are wild animals, no matter how tame they may seem." But something in the wolf's gaze made Jack reconsider. Slowly, he pushed Ethan's wheelchair towards the animal. To his surprise, the wolf didn't retreat. On the contrary, it took a few cautious steps towards them. When they were just a few meters apart, the wolf stopped. Ethan stretched out his hand, his heart pounding in his chest. For a moment, everything went silent. Then, to Jack's amazement and Ethan's joy, the wolf approached and allowed the boy to touch its soft fur. "I can't believe it," Jack muttered, watching the scene with a mixture of fear and admiration. Ethan felt a deep connection with the animal. It was as if he could sense the wolf's emotions, calm curiosity, an unexpected gentleness. "It won't hurt us, Grandpa," Ethan said with conviction. "I think it's here to help me." That night, during dinner, Ethan couldn't stop talking about the encounter with the wolf. Eleanor listened with a loving smile, while Jack seemed thoughtful. "You know," Jack began, putting his fork aside, "there's an old legend in this region. It speaks of a guardian spirit that takes the form of a wolf to protect those who need help." Ethan's eyes widened. "Do you think it could be true, Grandpa?" Jack shrugged. "Who knows? The world is full of mysteries, Ethan. Sometimes it's better to accept magic when it appears in our lives." Jack's words stayed with Ethan, fueling his dreams that night. He saw himself running through the forest alongside the wolf, his legs strong and agile again. In the dream, the wolf spoke to him, its voice deep and wise. "The strength is within you, Ethan, believe." The next morning, Ethan woke up with a sense of renewal. During his physiotherapy session, he surprised everyone by managing to move his toes for the first time since the accident. Dr. Ryan was amazed. "This is incredible, Ethan. You're progressing much faster than we expected." Ethan smiled, thinking of the wolf and the legend his grandfather had told. Perhaps there was more to this connection than he had initially imagined. In the days that followed, Ethan dedicated himself even more to his recovery. He spent hours doing exercises, visualizing himself walking again, and each day he felt stronger, more determined. The wolf continued to appear regularly, always maintaining a respectful distance, but clearly watching over Ethan. For the boy, the animal's presence was a constant reminder that miracles were possible. One night, as Ethan was watching the stars from the porch, he heard a familiar howl. Turning, he saw the wolf standing at the edge of the field, illuminated by moonlight. Without thinking twice, Ethan unlocked the wheels of his chair and began to move towards the animal. It was then that something extraordinary happened. As he got close to the wolf, Ethan felt a sudden wave of energy course through his body. With tremendous effort, he supported himself on the arms of the chair and, to his own amazement, managed to stand up. For a magical moment, Ethan stood there in the snow, looking into the wolf's eyes. Tears of joy streamed down his face as he took his first hesitant step in months. "Grandpa! Grandma!" he shouted, his voice trembling with emotion. "Come see." When Jack and Eleanor came running to the porch, they could hardly believe what they were seeing. Ethan was standing, taking shaky steps towards them, the grey wolf silently observing the scene a few meters away. At that moment, surrounded by the magic of the night and the love of his family, Ethan knew that his healing journey was just beginning. With the wolf as his mysterious guardian and the strength he had discovered within himself, he was ready to face any challenge the future might bring. The news of Ethan's first steps spread quickly. Dr. Ryan, the physiotherapist, was amazed at the sudden progress and intensified the therapy sessions. Days at the ranch gained a new rhythm, full of hope and determination. Ethan, driven by his miraculous experience, dedicated himself arduously to his recovery. Hours were spent on exercises, short walks supported by crutches, and hydrotherapy sessions in the pool that Jack had specially built for his grandson. Meanwhile, the presence of the grey wolf remained a mysterious constant. The animal appeared frequently, always maintaining a respectful distance, but its connection with Ethan was undeniable. The boy felt that the wolf was more than just an animal. It was a guide, a protector. One afternoon, as Ethan was practicing his exercises in the garden, Jessica appeared without warning. Her face, normally composed, showed signs of tension and irritation. "Ethan," she said, forcing a smile, "how nice to see you from standing." The tone of her voice didn't match her words. Ethan could sense that something was wrong. "Hi, Jessica," he replied cautiously. "What brings you here?" Before she could answer, Jack and Eleanor came out of the house, clearly surprised by the unexpected visit. "Jessica," Jack said, his voice cold. "We weren't expecting you." Jessica straightened her shoulders, her gaze hard. "I came to see how Ethan is doing. After all, as Michael's wife, I have responsibilities for his well-being." Eleanor stepped forward, placing herself protectively beside Ethan. "Ethan is doing very well in our care, thank you." The tension in the air was palpable. Ethan looked from one adult to another, feeling that there was more to this visit than met the eye. "Actually," Jessica continued, her tone now more aggressive, "I came to discuss Ethan's future. I received a proposal from a specialized clinic in Switzerland. They have a state-of-the-art rehabilitation program that could be perfect for him." Ethan felt his heart tighten. The idea of leaving the ranch, of being separated from his grandparents and the wolf, was terrifying. "No," he exclaimed, "I don't want to go. I'm making progress here with my family." Jessica cast a cold look at the boy. "Ethan, dear, you don't understand. It's for your own good. Besides, as your legal guardian, the decision is mine." Jack stepped forward, his voice thundering with anger. "Legal guardian? What are you talking about, Jessica?" It was at this moment that Jessica revealed her true intentions. She took an envelope from her purse and handed it to Jack. "Court documents," she said with a cold smile. "With Michael still in a coma, I was appointed Ethan's legal guardian. I have the right to make decisions about his treatment and housing." The shock was visible on everyone's faces. Ethan felt as if the ground had disappeared from under his feet. The idea of being taken away, of losing everything he had achieved, was too much to bear. It was then that something extraordinary happened. A powerful howl echoed across the property, making everyone turn. There at the edge of the forest stood the grey wolf, its golden eyes glowing with supernatural intensity. Jessica took a step back, frightened. "What is that? A wolf? Here?" Ethan felt a wave of courage wash over him. Leaning on his crutches, he positioned himself between Jessica and his grandparents. "This wolf has been protecting me since the accident," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. "It gave me strength to fight, to recover. I'm not going anywhere, Jessica. My place is here with my real family." As if responding to Ethan's words, the wolf slowly advanced, stopping beside the boy. The scene was surreal. A boy supported by crutches, side by side with a majestic wolf, facing a woman who seemed to shrink at the sight. Jack placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Jessica, you may have legal papers, but we have something much stronger. The love and support Ethan needs. We'll fight for him with all our strength." Jessica looked from Ethan to the wolf, then to Jack and Eleanor. For the first time, she seemed to falter. "This isn't over," she said, retreating towards her car. "You'll be hearing from my lawyers." As Jessica departed, leaving only a cloud of dust behind, Ethan turned to his grandparents, tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered, "for everything." Eleanor hugged him tightly. "We'll get through this together, my love. You're not alone." That night, as the family gathered in the living room to discuss the next steps, Ethan looked out the window. The wolf was there, vigilant as always. At that moment, Ethan understood that his journey was far from over. There were challenges ahead, legal battles to be fought. But with the love of his grandparents, the mysterious protection of the wolf, and the strength he had discovered within himself, Ethan knew he was ready to face any obstacle. His recovery was not just physical, but a journey of self-discovery and courage. As the sky darkened outside, Ethan made a silent promise to himself. He would not only walk again, but he would run free, like the wolf that inspired him. And no one, not Jessica, not any court, could take away from him the family and home he had found. The days following Jessica's visit were tense at the ranch. Jack and Eleanor spent hours on the phone with lawyers, discussing strategies to keep custody of Ethan. The boy, in turn, channeled his anxiety into his recovery, pushing himself beyond limits in each physiotherapy session. One morning, as Ethan was practicing his walking in the garden, supported by his crutches, he spotted the grey wolf at the edge of the forest. Impulsively, he decided to approach. "Hey, friend," Ethan called softly, taking careful steps towards the animal. The wolf tilted its head, as if listening intently. Its golden eyes shone with an almost human intelligence. "I don't know exactly what you are," Ethan continued, "but I know you've been helping me. I need your strength now more than ever." As if understanding, the wolf approached, allowing Ethan to touch its soft fur. At that moment, the boy felt a wave of warmth and energy course through his body, from head to toe. His legs, still weak, seemed to gain new life. Inspired by this connection, Ethan dedicated himself even more to his recovery. His improvements were remarkable, surprising even Dr. Ryan. "It's amazing, Ethan," the physiotherapist commented during a session. "I've never seen such a fast recovery. It's almost magical." Ethan smiled, thinking of the wolf. "Maybe it is," he replied enigmatically. Meanwhile, the legal battle intensified. Jessica had filed a formal custody request, claiming she could offer better medical care for Ethan. Jack and Eleanor, with the help of their lawyer, Mr. Davis, prepared their defense. One afternoon, as the family was discussing strategies in the living room, there was a knock at the door. To everyone's surprise, it was Michael, Ethan's father, accompanied by a nurse. "Dad!" Ethan exclaimed, hardly believing his eyes. Michael, still pale and visibly weak, smiled at his son. "Hey, champ," he said in a hoarse voice. "Sorry I'm late." Jack and Eleanor exchanged looks of astonishment. Michael had woken from the coma a few weeks earlier, but his recovery had been kept secret by Jessica. How are you here?" Jack asked, helping his son-in-law to sit down. Michael sighed deeply. "As soon as I was strong enough to understand what was going on, I demanded to be brought here. I couldn't believe what Jessica was doing." Ethan approached his father, tears in his eyes. "Dad, I missed you so much." Michael hugged his son tightly. "I missed you too, Ethan. More than you can imagine." In the days that followed, Michael was brought up to speed on everything that had happened. He was amazed at Ethan's progress and intrigued by the stories about the mysterious wolf. "Looks like you found quite a guardian," Michael commented, observing the wolf from a distance during a walk around the property. Michael's presence completely changed the course of the legal battle. He immediately revoked any legal power Jessica might have over Ethan and expressed his wish for his son to remain under Jack and Eleanor's care. Jessica, upon discovering that Michael had left the hospital, showed up at the ranch furious. "How could you?" she shouted at Michael. "You're throwing away everything we built." Michael, with surprising calm, faced his wife. "No, Jessica, I'm rebuilding what's really important, my family." At that moment, as if sensing the tension in the air, the grey wolf emerged from the forest, positioning itself beside Ethan. Jessica backed away, frightened by the animal's presence. "What is that? A wolf? It's dangerous," she exclaimed. Ethan put his hand on the wolf's fur, instantly feeling stronger. "He's not dangerous, Jessica. He protects me, just like my family does." Michael looked with admiration at his son and the wolf. There was something about that scene that deeply touched his heart. "It's over, Jessica," he said firmly. "Ethan stays here with his family, with the people and creatures who really care about him." Jessica, realizing she had lost, cast one last look of contempt at everyone before leaving behind only the echo of tires screeching on the dirt road. That night, the family gathered on the porch, watching the stars. Ethan, sitting between his father and grandparents, felt complete for the first time in a long time. You know," Michael began, breaking the silence, "when I was in the coma, I had strange dreams. I dreamed of a wolf guiding me back home to you all." Ethan and his grandparents exchanged meaningful looks. "Maybe," Jack said thoughtfully, "there are more mysteries in this world than we can understand." As the conversation flowed, full of plans for the future and memories of the past, Ethan saw the grey wolf at the edge of the field. The animal watched him with its wise eyes, as if satisfied with the outcome of events. Ethan smiled, feeling a deep gratitude. His healing journey was far from over, but now he knew he had everything he needed: the love of his family, the inner strength he had discovered, and the mysterious protection of his lupine guardian. 1 year passed since the dramatic family reunion that changed the course of Ethan's life. The ranch, once a temporary refuge, was now a true home for the entire family. Michael had moved there permanently, determined to rebuild his relationship with his son and reconnect with his roots. It was a spring morning when Ethan woke up, feeling stronger than ever. He looked out the window and saw the world outside blooming in vibrant colors. The trees were laden with flowers, and the air was perfumed with the sweet scent of renewal. With a smile, Ethan got up without help, his steps firm and confident. His recovery had been almost miraculous, surpassing all medical expectations. He knew deep in his heart that he owed much of his progress not only to his determination and the support of his family, but also to the mysterious presence of the grey wolf. Going down the stairs, Ethan found his family gathered in the kitchen. The aroma of fresh coffee and homemade bread filled the air. "Good morning, champ," Michael greeted, his face lit up with a proud smile as he saw his son walking without assistance. Eleanor approached, hugging her grandson. "Look at you, my love. Who would have thought a year could make such a difference?" Jack, sitting at the table reading the newspaper, raised his eyes with a look of admiration. "You surprise us every day, Ethan." Breakfast was a joyful meal, filled with laughter and plans for the future. Ethan shared his latest achievement. He had been accepted back into the local school and was eager to resume his studies. After the meal, Ethan decided to take a solitary walk around the property. He walked through the verdant fields, feeling the soft grass under his feet and the warm sun on his face. Each step was a silent celebration of his journey. As he approached the edge of the forest, Ethan felt a familiar presence. There he was, the grey wolf, majestic as ever, watching him from the shadow of the trees. "Hi, friend," Ethan called softly, approaching without fear. The wolf advanced, meeting Ethan halfway. Its golden eyes seemed to contain all the wisdom of the world. "I don't think I ever properly thanked you," Ethan said, kneeling to be at the animal's level, "for everything you did for me, for my family." The wolf tilted its head as if understanding every word. Then, to Ethan's surprise, it turned and began to walk towards the forest. After a few steps, the animal stopped and looked back as if inviting Ethan to follow it. Without hesitation, Ethan accompanied the wolf. Together, they entered the forest, the boy and his mysterious guardian. The path was smooth, illuminated by rays of sunlight penetrating through the treetops. After a short walk, they reached a clearing bathed in the golden light of morning. In the center was a small spring, its crystal-clear waters reflecting the blue sky above. The wolf approached the water and drank, then looked at Ethan expectantly. Understanding the silent invitation, Ethan knelt beside the spring and dipped his hands in the cool water. As he drank, he felt a wave of energy course through his body, as if he were absorbing the very essence of the forest. When Ethan raised his eyes, the wolf had disappeared. In its place, he saw an old sage, with long white hair and familiar golden eyes. "Don't be afraid, Ethan," the old man spoke, his voice soft as the wind through the leaves. "I am the guardian spirit of this forest, and I have watched over you since the day of the accident." Ethan, although surprised, felt no fear. "Why?" he asked simply. The old man smiled. "Because your heart is pure and your journey is important. You faced adversity with courage and compassion. Now you are ready for the next chapter of your life." "What should I do now?" Ethan questioned, feeling he was facing a crucial moment. "Live, Ethan," the guardian replied. "Live fully. Use your experience to help others, to protect nature, to spread love and understanding. Your journey of physical healing has ended, but your spiritual journey is just beginning." With these words, the old man began to glow, transforming back into the grey wolf. The animal gave one last look at Ethan before disappearing into the forest. Ethan stood there for a moment, absorbing everything that had happened. He felt renewed, transformed. With a smile on his face, he stood up and began to walk back home, each step full of purpose and gratitude. When he arrived at the ranch, Ethan found his family on the porch, worried about his long absence. "Ethan, where were you?" Eleanor asked, relieved to see him. Ethan smiled, his eyes shining with a new light. "Just taking a walk in the forest, Grandma, discovering new paths." That night, as the family gathered for dinner, Ethan looked out the window and saw a solitary wolf at the edge of the forest. He smiled, knowing that his guardian would always be nearby, even if invisible to the eye.